John Davis was just an ordinary engineer, living in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. The distant space colony where he worked was a quiet place, far removed from the bustling hub of intergalactic politics and trade. His days were spent fixing machines, maintaining the systems that kept the colony running smoothly. There was little excitement in his life, just routine. That was until one strange evening when everything changed. John had been working late, as usual. His small apartment was filled with the hum of machinery, a soft reminder of the work he still had to do. The dim light from a single lamp cast long shadows across the room, and the occasional beep of his communicator was the only sound breaking the silence. He was reading over the latest maintenance reports when the door to his apartment suddenly opened. John's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't expecting anyone. His first instinct was to grab the blaster resting on the table beside him, but before he could reach for it, he saw her. She stood in the doorway, her figure silhouetted by the dim light outside. She was tall, almost unnaturally so, with an aura of confidence that seemed to fill the room. Her skin shimmered in the soft light, a strange iridescent hue that made her look like something out of a dream. Her eyes, large and intense, locked with his. For a moment, neither of them moved. John stared, frozen in place. He had never seen anyone like her. She looked alien. Of course she was, but there was something more. Something powerful in the way she carried herself. Something that made his heart race faster than any situation he'd ever been in before. Then, without a word, she stepped inside, the door swinging shut behind her. As she moved, she accidentally brushed against a table, knocking a few of his tools onto the floor with a loud crash. John flinched at the noise, but she didn't seem to care. She didn't even look at the mess she had made. Instead, her gaze stayed fixed on him. "Don't just stare," she said, her voice low but firm. It wasn't a command, nor was it a question. It was as if she was stating the obvious, as if it was natural for her to walk into someone's home uninvited, and for them to do nothing but stare at her. John didn't know how to respond. His mouth was dry and his thoughts were a jumbled mess. His training as an engineer had never prepared him for anything like this. He had read about aliens, of course, but he had never imagined meeting one like this. "Who are you?" he finally managed to ask, his voice coming out a little more shaky than he intended. The woman tilted her head slightly, studying him with an almost amused expression. "Does it matter?" she asked. Her tone was calm, almost casual, as though this was all perfectly normal for her. John's mind raced. Was she dangerous? A part of him wanted to reach for the blaster, but another part of him, something deeper, knew that would be a mistake. There was something about her that made him hesitate, something that made him feel like he couldn't treat her like any other threat. "Maybe not," John said, his voice gaining some steadiness. "But you've walked into my home without permission. You've knocked things over, and you haven't even apologized." He took a step forward, trying to appear more confident than he felt. "I think that deserves an explanation." She seemed to consider his words for a moment, and then, to his surprise, she smiled, just a small curve of her lips, but it was enough to make John feel both uneasy and strangely drawn to her. "Fair enough," she said. "I wasn't expecting to be invited in. But I've been watching you, John Davis. I've been watching you for a long time." John's brow furrowed in confusion. "You've been watching me?" His mind raced to make sense of what she was saying. Was this some kind of test or a trap? He didn't know how to react, but the sense of danger was growing stronger by the second. "Yes," she answered, her voice smooth and confident. "You're exactly who I need." John blinked, trying to process her words. "I'm not sure what you mean." The woman took a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm Lyra," she said, her name sounding almost musical in the air. "I'm from the planet Aloria. My people are in danger, and I need your help." Her words were straightforward, but there was an edge to her voice that made it clear this wasn't a casual request. John didn't know what to say. He had never been involved in anything like this. He was just an engineer living a quiet life. How could he help someone like her? But even as the question formed in his mind, another part of him, the the part he didn't understand, was already moving. Something told him that his life would never be the same after this encounter. "I don't know how I can help you," John said, though his voice was softer now. He wasn't sure what she wanted from him, but a part of him wanted to find out. Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped past him and moved deeper into the apartment, as though she were making herself at home. She reached out to touch a small device on his table, and as her fingers brushed it, it sparked to life. John watched in awe as the ITER device, one he had been working on for weeks, began to glow with a soft green light. "You're the one who made this," she said, looking over her shoulder at him. "You're the one who can fix it." John didn't respond immediately. He didn't know what she was talking about. "What is this?" he finally asked, his voice thick with confusion. "It's the key," Lyra said, turning to face him fully. "The key to saving my people. You're the only one who can make it work." John felt a chill run down his spine. He was in way over his head. "I don't understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why me? Why now?" "Because," Lyra said, her voice suddenly quieter, "you're the only one who can help me. I've been looking for you, John Davis, and now it's time for you to choose. Will you help me, or will you turn your back on everything you've ever known?" John didn't know what to say. The weight of her words hung in the air, and for the first time in his life he felt truly unsure of what to do next. John couldn't shake the feeling that everything had suddenly turned upside down. Just moments ago, his life had been as normal, as it ever was, quiet, routine. Now he was standing in the middle of his apartment, facing an alien woman who claimed to need his help. But her words were so strange, so out of place. How could he possibly be the one to help her? He was just an engineer. Lyra stood near his workbench, her fingers lightly brushing over the tools and devices he had left scattered about. It was almost as if she didn't even notice them, her eyes fixed ahead, lost in thought. She had spoken, with such confidence as if the fate of her people rested entirely on his shoulders. "I don't understand," John finally said, trying to steady his nerves. "You say I'm the only one who can help you, but why? I'm just an engineer. I'm not a hero, I don't have any special skills." Lyra turned slowly to face him. Her expression softened, though her gaze still held a quiet intensity. She walked toward him, her long strides calm but purposeful. "You don't know what you're capable of, John. But you will." John frowned, feeling both intrigued and confused. He could feel the weight of her words, but they didn't make sense. What could he possibly do for an alien queen? "I don't even know you," he said. "How do you know me?" Lyra hesitated, her gaze shifting to the floor for just a moment, before she spoke again. "I've been watching you for some time, John. Ever since I found out about you, I've been tracking your progress." John's heart skipped a beat. "You've been tracking me? Why?" She nodded, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "I've been watching because you're the one who can fix something very important to me, a device that could save my people." John blinked in confusion. "What device? I don't understand." Lyra took a deep breath, as though gathering herself. "This device," she said, pointing to the small, glowing machine on his workbench, "is a key to my homeworld, Aloria. My people were once prosperous, a great civilization. But now, we're on the verge of destruction. A war broke out, and my family's throne was overthrown. I escaped, and this device is the only way I can reclaim what was lost." John was quiet for a moment, trying to process everything. He had heard of alien conflicts before, stories in the news, reports from travelers passing through the colony. But hearing it firsthand from Lyra was something else entirely. "So you want me to help you fix this thing?" he asked, glancing at the device again. Lyra nodded. "Yes, it's more than just a tool. It's a key to unlocking an ancient power. My ancestors built it to protect Aloria, and it's been hidden for centuries. But now it's broken, and without it, my people are lost." This device, when repaired, will give me the power to take back my throne. John felt a pang of uncertainty in his chest. He had no idea what this device was capable of, but Lyra's words made it sound like the stakes were incredibly high. But why me? I'm not some great warrior or a scientist, I'm just an engineer. Lyra's eyes softened as she stepped closer to him. That's where you're wrong, John. You're exactly the person I need. Your mind, your skills, the way you think. It's what's going to fix this. You have an ability that's rare even among the greatest minds of the galaxy. John still couldn't believe what she was saying. He had never thought of himself as anything special. Sure, he could fix things, machines, systems, engines, but he never imagined he'd be the one to help restore a lost alien kingdom. He was just a guy trying to make it through another day. Look, I don't know what to say, he said, rubbing his temples. This is too much. I've never been involved in anything like this before. What if I fail? Lyra's voice softened. You won't fail, John. You don't understand yet, but this is your purpose. There's something about you, something unique. You have the skills, the heart, and the determination. You're the one who can do it. John wanted to argue, to tell her that she was wrong, that he was just an ordinary person who didn't belong in the middle of a galactic conflict. But when he looked into her eyes, something inside him shifted. She wasn't asking him out of desperation or manipulation. She believed in him. And for some reason that belief made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he could do this. I don't know if I can fix your device, he said slowly, but if I can help you, I will. Lyra smiled, a small, genuine smile that seemed to light up the room. That's all I need, John. I'm not asking you to be a hero. I'm just asking you to do what you're good at. John took a deep breath and nodded. All right, I'll help you. But what happens after we fix this thing? What do you want from me then? Lyra's expression turned serious once more. Once we fix the device, we'll have to go back to Aloria. I'll need your help to reclaim my throne, to defeat those who took it from me. But this isn't just about me. It's about saving my people, restoring my world. John was quiet as he processed her words. The weight of the task ahead felt heavy, but it also felt right. It was strange, but deep down, he knew that this was where his life was leading him. Lyra stepped back, letting him absorb everything. The first step is fixing the device, she said. And we have to do it quickly. I've already been hunted for too long. We don't have much time before the ones who betrayed me come for us. John nodded, determination setting in. Then let's fix it. The days that followed were filled with urgency. John had made the decision to help Lyra, but now everything felt real. The quiet life he had known was slipping away, replaced by a sense of responsibility he never expected. There was no turning back now. Lyra had been staying in his apartment ever since her arrival. At first, John had felt uneasy about her presence, but the more he learned about her, the more he understood why she was here. She wasn't just an alien seeking refuge. She was the last of her royal family on the run, from those who had overthrown her and destroyed her world. John found himself growing attached to her in a way he hadn't expected. There was a strength in Lyra that was both inspiring and intimidating. She carried herself like someone who had seen the worst of the galaxy, yet there was a vulnerability beneath the surface, a loneliness that she hadn't spoken about, but that John could sense. We need to move, Lyra said one evening, her voice steady as she gathered the few belongings she had brought with her. They're getting closer. The people who want me dead. John looked up from the device he had been working on. He had spent hours trying to fix the strange machine Lyra had shown him. It was complex, far beyond anything he had worked on before, but he was determined to get it right. If he didn't, everything Lyra had been fighting for would be lost. Move? He asked. Where will we go? There's a hidden path beneath the colony, Lyra explained. I'll take you there. We can't stay here much longer. If we're caught, it's over. John's stomach tightened at the thought. He had lived a simple life, always playing it safe. But now he was caught up in a dangerous mission, and there was no way to predict what would happen next. The weight, of the situation pressed down on him, but he pushed the fear aside. "I'm ready," he said, standing up and packing his things. "Let's go." Lyra led the way through the apartment, her movements quick and purposeful. John followed closely, behind, feeling a strange sense of camaraderie with her. Despite the fear, despite the unknown, he knew he wasn't alone. They reached the back of the apartment where a hidden door was built into the wall. Lyra pressed a small button on the wall, and the door slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel that led into darkness. "This is the way out," she said, her voice low. "Stay close to me, and keep quiet." John followed her into the tunnel, the door closing behind them with a soft hiss. The air was cool, and the walls were damp, but the further they went, the more he could sense the urgency in Lyra's steps. She moved like someone who had done this before, someone who had spent a lifetime running. They walked for what seemed like hours, the only sound the soft echo of their footsteps. John tried to keep up, but his mind kept drifting back to the life he had left behind. He had no idea what was waiting for them on the other side of this tunnel. But he knew one thing for sure. His life would never be the same. "I can't believe I'm doing this," he muttered under his breath. Lyra glanced over at him, her face serious. "This is bigger than us, John. This is about saving an entire people." "I know," John replied, his voice low. "I just never thought I'd be the one to do it." They reached a small chamber deep in the tunnel, and Lyra stopped. "We'll rest here for a moment," she said, her voice still calm despite the tension in the air. "We can't risk going too far ahead just yet." John nodded and sat down on a nearby rock, trying to steady his breath. He hadn't realized how tired he was until now. The constant fear, the running, it was starting to take its toll. He glanced at Lyra, who was standing across the chamber looking as composed as ever. "Do you ever get scared?" John asked suddenly. Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment she didn't answer. Then she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Fear is a luxury I can't afford. If I stop, if I let it take over, my people lose." John was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. He didn't know what it was like to carry the weight of an entire civilization on your shoulders, to have everything you've ever known taken from you in an instant. He couldn't imagine the pain and fear Lyra must have felt. "I get scared," John admitted quietly, "but I won't stop." Lyra nodded slowly as though she understood. "Good. We need that strength. Both of us." They spent a few minutes in silence before Lyra stood and motioned for him to follow. "We have to keep moving," she said. "We're almost out of the colony. Once we're through the tunnel, we can make our way to the outer rim. From there, I'll contact my allies." John stood up, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He had no idea what awaited them, but for the first time in a long while he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. As they continued their journey through the tunnel, John couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. They were running from a past they couldn't outrun, heading toward a future that was uncertain at best. But no matter what happened, he knew one thing. He would face it with Lyra by his side, and maybe, just maybe, they could win. The days after escaping the colony were filled with tension. John and Lyra had made their way out of the hidden tunnels, but they weren't safe yet. The colony's forces were still on their trail, and it wouldn't take long before they were caught if they didn't act quickly. As they traveled through the outer rim, the vast, barren landscape stretched out before them. There were no cities, no colonies here, just wide-open plains and rocky hills. It felt like another world entirely. John had never been this far from the colony before, and it felt both liberating and terrifying. Lyra had been quiet most of the journey, her mind clearly focused on something far beyond their immediate surroundings. John could see the weight of her thoughts in the way she moved, always alert, always ready for anything. "We should stop soon," John said, his voice breaking the silence. He was feeling the exhaustion creeping in, the weight of their escape, finally taking a toll on him. "We need to rest for a bit." Lyra didn't respond immediately. She was scanning the horizon, her sharp eyes constantly moving, assessing the situation. Finally, after a long moment, she nodded. You're right, we'll rest for a short time, but we can't stay in one place for too long. The soldiers will be looking for us. They found shelter in a small cave that overlooked the vast plains. It was a perfect spot to hide for now. But John knew it wouldn't be long before they were forced to move again. The days of peace he had once known felt like a distant memory, replaced by the constant fear of being found. Lyra set up a small campfire in the middle of the cave, her hands moving with the efficiency of someone used to survival. John sat down nearby, his mind racing. It was hard to believe how quickly his life had changed. He was just a regular engineer, and now he was on the run with a woman he barely knew, helping her reclaim her throne and save her people. This is crazy, John muttered to himself, rubbing his hands over his face. I'm not cut out for this. Lyra glanced over at him, her expression unreadable. You're doing just fine, she said simply. John didn't respond, but he appreciated the reassurance. He was trying his best, but the reality of what they were doing was starting to sink in. The odds were stacked against them. Lyra's enemies were powerful, and even if they could fix the device, there was no guarantee that it would be enough to take back her throne. What happens after we fix the device? John asked, his voice quiet. Lyra paused as if considering his question. She looked into the fire for a moment before answering. Once we repair the device, we'll have the power to challenge the usurper. But it won't be easy. He has an army, and he won't give up the throne without a fight. John nodded. So we're not just fixing a device, we're starting a war. Not a war, Lyra corrected gently. A battle for what is rightfully mine. My people don't deserve to live under the rule of a tyrant, they deserve freedom. John could hear the passion in her voice, and for the first time, he understood the full weight of what she was asking. This wasn't just about fixing a machine. It was about restoring hope to a people who had been oppressed for far too long. It was about doing what was necessary no matter the cost. As the night wore on, they ate what little food they had left. John's stomach growled in protest, but he didn't complain. They were both hungry, and there wasn't much they could do about it. The planet they were on was harsh and unforgiving, with few resources to be found. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. John couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. He had never been in a battle before, never had to fight for something so important. He was just a regular guy, and yet, here he was preparing to stand beside a princess and fight for her people. I don't know if I'm cut out for this, John said finally, his voice heavy with doubt. I've never been a fighter. I'm just an engineer. Lyra looked up from the fire, her gaze steady and focused. You don't have to be a fighter, John, you just have to be brave. John looked at her, trying to understand. Brave? How? Bravery isn't about being fearless, Lyra explained. It's about facing your fear and doing what's right even when it seems impossible. You don't have to be a warrior. You just have to stand beside me when it matters. John thought about her words. He didn't have the skills of a soldier, but maybe, just maybe, that wasn't what mattered. It wasn't about fighting with weapons or being the strongest. It was about doing what was right, about standing up when others couldn't or wouldn't. Okay, he said after a long pause. I'll stand with you. Lyra smiled, a small but genuine smile that made John feel like maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. That's all I need, John. We'll get through this together. As the fire crackled between them, the sound of distant footsteps reached their ears. Both John and Lyra froze. They had been too lost in their conversation to hear the approach of the enemy. Lyra's expression hardened in an instant. They found us. John stood up quickly, his heart racing. What do we do? We fight, Lyra said, her voice filled with resolve. We're not running anymore. John grabbed the blaster that was lying beside him, his hands trembling slightly as he checked the charge. Lyra had been training him in the basics of self-defense since they started their journey, but he had never been in a real fight. Now, there was no choice. They had to survive. The footsteps grew louder, and the sound of voices drifted through the cave. They were closing in. Lyra turned to him, her eyes blazing with determination. "Ready?" John didn't hesitate. "Ready." They stood together in the shadows, waiting for the enemy to make their move. The battle for survival was just beginning. The cave was still and silent, but the tension in the air was thick. John could hear the distant voices growing louder, the sound of boots scraping against the rough terrain echoing through the night. His heart was pounding in his chest, his grip tightening around the blaster in his hands. This was real. The fight was no longer a distant possibility. It was here. Lyra, standing beside him, had already assessed their situation. Her eyes were focused, her posture calm and composed, as though she had faced danger 1,000 times before. John, on the other hand, felt like his heart might burst out of his chest at any moment. He had never been in a fight like this, never had to face someone who wanted to kill him. "This is it," Lyra whispered, her voice steady. "Stay close. We fight together and we fight to win." John nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. He wasn't a warrior. He had never fired a blaster in combat. He was just an engineer, a fixer of machines. But looking at Lyra, her confidence and strength, he knew that he couldn't let her down. Not now. Not after everything she had shared. With him. The footsteps outside grew louder and John's breathing quickened. They were close. Too close. Lyra motioned for him to follow her, and they crept toward the entrance of the cave. Lyra's movements were swift and quiet, her footsteps barely making a sound as she navigated the rocky floor. John tried to keep up, his every instinct telling him to run, to hide. But he knew there was no escape. Not now. Not if they wanted to survive. They reached the mouth of the cave, crouching low behind a large rock. From their vantage point, they could see the enemy soldiers approaching, their dark figures outlined by the dim light of distant stars. There were at least 5 of them, armed and ready for a fight. John's eyes narrowed. They didn't stand a chance. "Do you have a plan?" John whispered, his voice barely audible. Lyra nodded. "We wait for them to come closer. I'll take the first shot. You follow my lead." John swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had never been in a real battle before. He didn't know what to expect. But he trusted Lyra. She was the one who had been trained for this, not him. He just had to do his part. The soldiers grew closer, their voices carrying through the night. They were still unaware of the hidden cave, unaware of the 2 figures waiting to strike. John's heart raced as the gap between them and the soldiers closed. "Get ready," Lyra whispered, her voice a low hiss. John nodded, though his palms were sweating. His fingers trembled as he held the blaster. His mind was racing. Focus. Stay calm. Follow Lyra's lead. At the right moment, Lyra stood up from behind the rock and fired a shot. The sound of the blaster echoed through the quiet landscape, and one of the soldiers fell to the ground with a grunt. The others scattered, reaching for their weapons. But Lyra was already moving, quick and precise, as she took down another soldier. With ease. John followed her lead, firing his blaster at the 3rd soldier. His aim was shaky, but the shot hit its mark. The soldier collapsed, his weapon falling to the ground with a loud clatter. The remaining 2 soldiers looked at each other, clearly stunned by the sudden turn of events. They hesitated for a moment, but then, realizing they were outmatched, started to retreat. Lyra moved swiftly, taking down the last 2 soldiers with a combination of well-aimed shots. John stood frozen for a moment, staring at the bodies of the fallen soldiers. It had happened so quickly. He had never imagined he would be part of something like this. Breathing heavily, Lyra turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "You did good," she said, her voice calm despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. John didn't know how to respond. He was still trying to process what had just happened. He had just killed people. That wasn't something he was used to, but looking at Lyra, he saw that she didn't have the luxury of time to question these things. For her, this was a fight for survival, for the future of her people. "We need to move," Lyra said, her voice steady but urgent. "We can't stay here long. The rest of their group will be looking for us." John nodded, his mind racing. They had won this small battle, but the war wasn't over. The usurper still held the throne. and Lyra still had much to do if she was going to reclaim her people's future. They left the cave quickly, moving through the rocky terrain with purpose. John stayed close to Lyra, his thoughts scattered but his resolve firm. He had come so far with her already, and he wasn't about to stop now. As they made their way toward the outskirts of the planet, Lyra spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "We've made it this far, but the real challenge is still ahead of us. The usurper won't give up without a fight. We'll need allies, resources, money, and time." John looked at her, his heart swelling with a sense of determination. "We'll find a way," he said quietly. "We'll do it together." Lyra smiled at him, a genuine smile that made him feel like he wasn't alone in this after all. "Together," she agreed. As they walked into the night, the distant stars shining overhead, John realized that he had come to understand something important. He wasn't just helping Lyra out of some sense of duty. He was doing this because for the first time in his life, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. He had found a purpose in this fight, something worth fighting for, and, no matter how hard the road ahead might be, John knew he wouldn't stop. He would stand by Lyra, and together, they would reclaim her throne and restore hope to her people. The battle wasn't over, but now, they were ready for whatever came next.